He's my favorite.
I'm a school bus driver and I'm a pastor.
And a school board member.
What?
And a school board member.
Oh, and a school board member. That's true. He is. I'm Mrs. Moon. I'm Mrs. Cissel's mom. And I work at a place called Children's Hospital. I'm what they call a respiratory therapist. I do therapy on children that have really bad lung diseases. So that's what I do. I work with little babies all the way up to teenagers.
The children are being very quiet. What's going on?
They are listening very attentively. I'm telling you, I've got a very good class.
Very good. Hey, guys, this is a book that I like reading to my grandchildren, so that would be Mrs. Cissel's children. And I like this book because in Pennsylvania right now, it's -9 degrees.
Very snowy.
And we have a wind chill of about -20. So the wind is blowing. And we currently have about 8 inches of snow in our front yard. And we're expecting another 5 or 6 inches tomorrow. This is called the Wild Toboggan Ride.
Are you going to read a page and then I'll read a page?
That's good. And it's by Suzanne Reed.
You guys hear tweeting in the background. That's because Mrs. Moon has 4 birds. You can ask Miss Cissel about them.
Wow. I love them.
Yeah.
They're pretty. I want to see the birds.
If you want to hold it up, I'll read it. Guys, can you see the picture?
Yes.
Oh, very good. Okay, this is your dramatic reading. The Wild Toboggan Ride by Suzanne Reed. The afternoon was crisp and quiet, and Nikki pulled her long toboggan to the top of the hill where Grandpa Dan was standing, tapping his boot in the snow. Come along, he frowned. I'm chilled to the bone, fiddlesticks to snow. Please, Grandpa Dan, just one more ride, pleaded Nikki. Yeah, I don't think Grandpa Dan wants to go on a toboggan ride.
Hey, Mom,
fiddlesticks,
show them the
Grandpa
pictures
Dan.
instead of the words.
Nasty weather. Will you push me, please? Nikki begged. Phooey, this is the last one then. Grandpa Dan leaned over to give Nikki a tiny push on her long toboggan. And as he bent over, he stepped on his extra long scarf and his foot slipped. Bump, oof, crash. Grandpa Dan landed on the back of the long toboggan with Nikki on his lap.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, this is not going like planned. Yahoo! Yelled Nikki. Good grief, gasped Grandpa Dan. How do you steer this thing? Down the hill they went, gathering speed with Grandpa Dan's extra long scarf flapping in the wind. Yahoo! Nikki yelled again.
Wait a minute.
Well, they reached the bottom of the hill and the toboggan swerved left. Whoa! Sputtered Grandpa Dan from extra long scarf. I can't see a thing. Boom! Matt crashed. The baker crossed the street and landed right on top of Grandpa Dan and Nikki. Good grief! Move up! Yelled Grandpa Dan. What on earth are you doing, Dan? Asked the baker. Trying to steer this confounded contraption. Move your head, I can't see a thing. Along the street, they zoomed. Along the street zoomed Grandpa Dan, Nikki, and the baker, all on the long toboggan. Bump, oomph, crash. The police chief, on his way home from work, landed on top of the barber. Get your foot off my head, said the barber. Wowza, Dan! Do you have a license for this thing? Asked the police chief. Move up, we're getting squished back here, called the baker. Through the park whizzed Grandpa Dan, Nikki, the baker, and the barber, and the police chief, all on the long toboggan. Oh my. Bump, oomph, crash. The mail carrier with her bag of letters landed on top of the police chief. Sorry, Chief, said the mail carrier. Get your bag off my lap and sit down, said the police chief. This is my spot. Good grief, Grandpa Dan yelled. With everybody dancing around up there, I can't see a thing. Out of the park and onto the frozen lake went Grandpa Dan, Nicky, the baker, the barber, the police chief, and the mail carrier, all on the long toboggan. Bump, oof, crash. A hockey player landed on top of the mail carrier. Penalty, yelled the hockey player. Interference. Oh, be quiet, said the mail carrier. Everybody hold on, yelled Grandpa Dan. Yahoo, cried Nicky. Over the ice and straight toward the snowbank went Grandpa Dan, Nicky, the baker, the barber, the police chief, the mail carrier, and the hockey player, all on the long toboggan. Bump, oomph, crash. The toboggan flew into the snowbank, and suddenly bodies were tumbling in every direction. Hats, gloves, scarves soared through the air. Grandpa Dan and Nicky landed in a bush. The baker and the barber landed in a tree. And the police chief and the mail carrier and the hockey player landed in the garbage can.
Oh, no.
Sorry.
For a moment, nobody moved. Everything was quiet. Then Grandpa Dan and Nicky crawled out of the bushes. The barber and the baker climbed out of the tree. The police chief and the mail carrier and the hockey player jumped out of the garbage can. Grandpa Dan grabbed the toboggan and began to run across the ice, his extra long scarf flapping behind him. The baker, the barber, the police chief, the mail carrier, the hockey player looked at each other, and they all started running too. Wait, Grandpa Dan, where are you going? Yelled Nicky. If we hurry, he called back, we can get in one more ride before dark. And that's the Wild Toboggan Ride.
What did you guys think?
That was wonderful.
Yay! Do we have time that Mrs. Moon and I can tell you what we liked about the story?
Yeah, you do.
Is time for that?
Yeah.
Here's what I like about the story. I've read this story a lot, children, and every time I read it, it always entertains me. But what I really like about it is, at the beginning of the story, Grandpa Dan was grumpy. He was grouchy. He did not want to play. He was cold. He was uncomfortable. He just wanted to go home. But his granddaughter, Nicky, convinced him to take one more ride. And by an accident, remember he tripped over his extra long scarf? By accident, he ended up having a blast. He had a lot of fun. And I like that. Sometimes we can feel pretty grumpy, and we can feel like we don't want to play, but something will happen, and we end up having a really lot of fun if we allow ourselves. That's what I like about the story.
I like that everybody else seemed to be having fun as well, even when he knocked into them and they fell on the sled. It wasn't what they were expecting. And sometimes in life, things don't turn out the way you expect them to. But if you ride along and have a good attitude, it sure makes ride fun.
Hey, thanks for letting us read to you guys. We'd love to do it again sometime if Mrs. Cissel and Miss Rice say it's okay. And a special shout out to Miss Rice because she allowed this to happen today.
Yes.
And I'm recording this so I can show that to her later.
Oh,
good.
that's
Thank you, Miss Rice.
good.
All right.
So what did the kids think?
All right, guys, do you want to, I can invite that other computer in. If I can't have everybody. I don't think I have enough time, although everybody can comment on Kid Blog today. That would be perfectly fine with me. But does anybody, I can take about 5 people maybe that want to ask Mr. Moon a question, and I've got a ton of hands up. So, Papa, what I'm going to do is I've got a Chromebook set up. I'm going to let that Chromebook, you guys can put your hands back down. I'm going to let that Chromebook open up so you guys can so that the kids can go over to that Chromebook, say what they want to say, ask the question, and come back to the carpet. Are you okay with that, Papa?
We're good with that.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording just because it's getting kind of cumbersome to hold this. So, yeah, so I'm going to